The sound of lightning filled the air, a sharp and menacing crackle that seemed to pierce through the tension in the Chancellor's chambers. Mace Windu's lightsaber cast a defiant purple glow as he held his ground against the unrelenting storm of energy from Palpatine. Every muscle in the Jedi Master's body strained under the assault, his expression steeled with the knowledge that the Sith's death was the only way to preserve the Republic. Behind him, Anakin Skywalker hesitated. His breath came in short, ragged bursts as his mind raced through the conflicting emotions gripping his heart. Palpatine's promises rang in his ears, sweet words coated in the bitterness of desperation. Anakin's fear of losing Padmé, the woman he could not live without, consumed him. The Jedi had warned him of attachment, of the dangers it brought, but they had failed to understand the depth of his love, or his fear. Palpatine's voice, hoarse yet commanding, cut through the chaos. "You see it, don't you, Anakin? The Jedi are traitors. They fear your power. Strike, and together we can save Padmé." Mace turned slightly, his gaze locking with Anakin's for a brief moment. "Anakin, don't listen to him. He's deceiving you." But it was too late. The seeds of doubt had taken root, nourished by Palpatine's manipulations. In one swift, almost instinctive motion, Anakin ignited his lightsaber and struck. The blade sliced through Mace's wrist, sending his saber tumbling out of his hand. The Jedi Master's cry of pain was brief, drowned out by the surge of energy that followed. Palpatine unleashed his full power, hurling Mace through the shattered window into the night. Silence fell over the room, broken only by Anakin's labored breathing. His lightsaber dropped from his trembling hand, and he sank to his knees. The realization of what he had done clawed at his mind, but Palpatine's voice drew him back, steady and commanding. "You have made the right choice, my apprentice," Palpatine said, his tone almost soothing. "Now, rise, Darth Vader." Anakin's head lifted, his expression hollow. In that moment, Anakin Skywalker ceased to exist, replaced by something colder, something darker. The news of Mace Windu's death traveled swiftly. Within hours, the Jedi Temple was awash with uncertainty and fear. The Council convened in haste, their faces grim as they absorbed the weight of what had happened. Anakin Skywalker, once their prodigy, their chosen one, had betrayed them. Obi-Wan Kenobi sat in stunned silence, his mind struggling to reconcile the boy he had trained with the man who had turned against them. Yoda, seated at the center, seemed smaller than ever, his expression heavy with sorrow. "The dark side clouds all. Shrouded our future has become." Ki-Adi-Mundi's voice was sharp, cutting through the silence. "We must act. If Skywalker has truly fallen, he cannot be allowed to remain free." Obi-Wan's voice was barely above a whisper. "Anakin wouldn't do this without reason. There's still good in him." "Good?" Plo Koon interjected, his tone edged with disbelief. "Master Kenobi, he killed Mace Windu. If we hesitate, the consequences will be catastrophic." Yoda raised a hand, silencing the debate. "Lost, Anakin is. But vengeance, the Jedi way, is not. Survive, we must." Their path forward was uncertain, but the Council knew the galaxy was already unraveling. Palpatine's grip on power tightened with Anakin at his side. Order 66 was imminent, though the Jedi did not yet know it by name. Their only hope lay in scattering their ranks, preserving what knowledge and strength they could. In the shadows of the Republic, chaos reigned. The fall of Mace Windu and the Jedi Order's growing instability emboldened Palpatine. His apprentice, now clad in darkness, led the 501st Legion in an assault on the Jedi Temple. Anakin's descent was brutal, his blade striking down those he once called allies. Meanwhile, the Republic transformed into the Empire, its citizens unaware of the Sith's machinations. The Separatists, still waging war, found themselves outmaneuvered as Palpatine played both sides to cement his rule. Padmé Amidala watched the events unfold with horror. She had known Anakin's anger, his fear, but she had believed in his goodness. Now, she saw a galaxy crumbling under the weight of his choices. The man she loved had become a weapon of tyranny, and she resolved to fight against it, no matter the cost. The galaxy stood on the brink, its fate tied to the blade that chose, and the man who wielded it. The Battle of Naboo had ended in victory, a victory shared by Jedi and allies who celebrated the peace they had restored. Among them, Padmé Amidala remained a determined figure, her resolve as queen unwavering. Anakin Skywalker, the young hero who had helped destroy the Trade Federation's blockade, stood on the fringes of her attention, a boy full of potential, but no more than a memory of the battle's chaos. Without the spark of a personal connection between Anakin and Padmé, the Clone Wars unfolded along a much different path. As years passed and Anakin matured within the Jedi Order, he became a formidable knight. But his journey lacked the undercurrent of forbidden love that had shaped so many of his decisions in another timeline. The bond with Padmé that had pulled him toward the dark side instead became a fleeting moment from his past, buried beneath the layers of discipline instilled by Obi-Wan Kenobi and the Council. The absence of Padmé's love created a profound shift in Anakin's mindset. His attachments, though still present in his strong loyalty to Obi-Wan and his belief in the Republic, were tempered by the lack of a singular emotional vulnerability. It was a paradox. Anakin remained passionate, but without the gravitational pull of a forbidden relationship. His passion was directed more purposefully toward his duties as a Jedi. His potential to disrupt the Order, though ever present, remained dormant. The Jedi Council viewed Anakin with cautious optimism, recognizing his unparalleled skill while acknowledging the shadow of his destiny. Obi-Wan, ever the dutiful mentor, guided him with the same precision and care, though their dynamic lacked the tension born of secrets. When Palpatine began to weave his manipulative threads, his influence over Anakin was less potent. The Chancellor's attempts to exploit Anakin's fears fell flat against a young Jedi whose most profound weakness, the fear of losing Padmé, simply did not exist. The Clone Wars raged on, but Anakin's role became that of a brilliant tactician and a celebrated warrior. Without the weight of his inner turmoil, his decisions were more measured, though not without flaws. His recklessness in battle still drew the ire of the Council, and his victories sometimes came at great cost. Yet the galaxy saw him as a symbol of hope, a Jedi who could stand against the darkness creeping ever closer. Padmé, meanwhile, followed her own path. She remained a stalwart voice in the Senate, a leader advocating for peace, even as the war consumed more of the Republic's resources. Her relationship with Anakin remained distant, limited to formal encounters in the political arena. There was admiration, perhaps even friendship, but nothing more. In her stead, it was Obi-Wan and the Council who became the primary anchors in Anakin's life, shaping him into a man who fought for the ideals of the Jedi Order. Yet, beneath the surface, the Force stirred restlessly. Anakin's destiny as the Chosen One could not be so easily avoided. Palpatine's ambitions to seize control of the galaxy remained unchanged, and his schemes continued to erode the Republic's foundation. The Jedi Order, for all its efforts to guide Anakin, remained blind to the Sith Lord's presence within their midst. While the absence of forbidden love shielded Anakin from one path to the dark side, it did not erase the potential for corruption entirely. In this timeline, the Jedi Order stood on fragile ground, its survival dependent on whether Anakin's choices could overcome the forces conspiring against him. And though Padmé was absent from his heart, the shadow of the dark side still loomed, waiting for its moment. The Clone Wars raged across the galaxy, and Obi-Wan Kenobi was hailed as one of the Republic's most trusted generals. His calm demeanor, unshakable loyalty, and tactical brilliance made him a symbol of the Jedi Order's strength. Yet even the strongest lights can cast long shadows, and Obi-Wan's was no exception. Unbeknownst to the Jedi, Palpatine's web of influence extended far beyond Anakin Skywalker. Quietly, patiently, he set his sights on a new prize, Obi-Wan Kenobi. The shift began subtly. In strategy sessions between the Jedi and the Senate, Palpatine often praised Obi-Wan's diplomacy and leadership. A shining example of what the Jedi Order should aspire to, he would say, planting the seeds of pride in Obi-Wan's heart. Obi-Wan, ever humble, dismissed the comments as flattery, but over time the Chancellor's words began to resonate. Palpatine framed the Jedi Council's rigidity as a hindrance to true justice, subtly questioning their methods, while extolling Obi-Wan's unique approach. When the war brought Obi-Wan to Coruscant for extended stays, Palpatine seized the opportunity to strengthen his hold. He invited Obi-Wan to private discussions, ostensibly to consult on the Republic's defense strategies. These conversations began innocently enough, centered on tactics and politics. But Palpatine, master of manipulation, gradually shifted their focus. He spoke of the burdens of leadership, of the moral compromises necessary to end the war. He painted the Jedi Council as an organization bound by outdated dogma, incapable of adapting to the galaxy's needs. Through it all, he presented himself as a confidant, someone who understood Obi-Wan's struggles in ways the Council never could. Obi-Wan's doubts grew in the quiet moments between battles. He questioned the Council's decisions, their insistence on restraint while the galaxy burned. Palpatine's words offered a seductive clarity. Peace required control, and control sometimes demanded difficult choices. Obi-Wan convinced himself that his growing frustrations were rooted in the Jedi's failure to act decisively, not in the dark whispers of the Chancellor. The tipping point came during a mission to a distant Outer Rim planet. Obi-Wan and his clone battalion were ambushed, outnumbered and cut off from reinforcements. In the chaos, Palpatine's voice reached him through a secure channel. "You must do what is necessary, my friend," the Chancellor urged. "The Jedi may not approve, but the Republic's survival depends on your strength." Desperate to save his men, Obi-Wan employed tactics the Jedi Code would have condemned, sacrificing hostages and leveraging fear to secure victory. Though the mission succeeded, the cost weighed heavily on him. Palpatine, ever watchful, offered solace and justification. As Obi-Wan drifted closer to the dark side, the ripple effects were profound. Anakin, once guided by Obi-Wan's steadfast example, sensed his master's growing turmoil. The bond between them strained under the weight of unspoken doubts. Anakin's own struggles with the Jedi Order deepened as he watched Obi-Wan, his moral anchor, falter. Meanwhile, the Council grew increasingly concerned with Obi-Wan's actions, though they lacked proof of his inner conflict. Yoda, in particular, felt the disturbance but could not pinpoint its source. The galaxy shifted as the war escalated. Palpatine's influence over Obi-Wan transformed him from a beacon of hope into a shadowed figure, still outwardly loyal to the Jedi, but increasingly aligned with the Chancellor's vision. The stage was set for a confrontation not between Master and Apprentice, but between the Jedi's brightest light and its deepest darkness. As the Clone Wars reached their peak, Obi-Wan Kenobi's path veered closer to that of a Sith heir, a pawn in Palpatine's grand design to reshape the galaxy. The Jedi Temple buzzed with unease. The discovery of an inhibitor chip embedded in the brain of a fallen clone trooper had changed everything. What began as a faint suspicion after the troubling words of a clone named Fives had now unraveled into a revelation that shook the foundation of the Republic's trust in its military. The Jedi had stumbled upon Palpatine's most sinister plan before it could be enacted. Order 66, the catastrophic command designed to destroy the Jedi, was laid bare. Acting swiftly, the Jedi Council ordered a covert investigation. Master Shak Ti, stationed on Kamino, spearheaded the effort to uncover the chip's purpose. In secret, Jedi healers worked alongside trusted scientists to safely remove the devices from key clones, starting with commanders like Rex and Cody. As the truth spread among the clone ranks, confusion gave way to anger. These soldiers, bred to be loyal to the Republic, realized they had been pawns in a far darker scheme. Palpatine, for all his cunning, had not anticipated this development. His plan to simultaneously wipe out the Jedi and solidify his control over the galaxy now faced a critical setback. The Sith Lord's calm demeanor in the Senate concealed the storm brewing behind the scenes. His influence over the Republic's machinery remained strong, but the Jedi's discovery forced him to accelerate his plans in ways that risked exposure. As the Jedi dismantled the chips, they faced an entirely new challenge. What to do with this knowledge? To act openly against Palpatine would mean declaring war on the Senate itself, an act that could shatter the fragile unity of the Republic. The Council debated fiercely. Mace Windu, ever pragmatic, argued for immediate action to arrest the Chancellor. Yoda urged caution, fearing the political and military fallout of a misstep. Ultimately, the Jedi chose a middle path, opting to quietly gather allies and build their case against Palpatine while keeping the clones' loyalty intact. The removal of the inhibitor chips led to a wave of unrest within the Republic's armies. Freed from the artificial restraints on their minds, many clones began questioning their role in the war. Some doubted the Jedi's leadership, while others turned their scrutiny toward the politicians steering the conflict. This division spread to the Senate, where cracks in Palpatine's control began to form. Senators like Bail Organa and Mon Mothma, previously hesitant to oppose the Chancellor directly, seized on the Jedi's revelations to demand greater transparency. The war itself descended into chaos. Without the looming threat of Order 66, the Jedi fought with renewed vigor, but their victories on the battlefield exposed deeper fractures in the Republic's infrastructure. Corruption and inefficiency plagued the Senate, while separatist leaders, emboldened by the Republic's internal strife, launched increasingly desperate offensives. Palpatine worked tirelessly to reassert his dominance. He painted the Jedi as meddlers, accusing them of undermining the Republic's unity. His propaganda machine churned out messages of fear and loyalty, pushing the narrative that only his strong leadership could save the galaxy from ruin. Yet the Jedi's quiet resistance, combined with the clones' growing awareness, made it clear that his grip was slipping. For the galaxy, this reality was a double-edged sword. The Jedi had avoided their annihilation, but the Republic teetered on the brink of collapse. The war, no longer a clear battle between good and evil, became a murky quagmire of shifting alliances and shattered trust. As Palpatine plotted his next move, the Jedi knew they were racing against time. The galaxy was no longer divided neatly into two sides. Instead, it was a tangled web of betrayal and uncertainty. Amid the chaos, the Jedi held firm, knowing the greatest battle still lay ahead. The clash of lightsabers in Theed's power generator chamber ended differently this time. Qui-Gon Jinn, with his calm focus and deep connection to the Force, managed to outmaneuver Darth Maul's vicious assault. As the Sith fell to his death, Qui-Gon stood victorious, battered but alive. Obi-Wan Kenobi rushed to his master's side, relief evident in his every movement. This survival would change the galaxy in ways no one could have predicted. Qui-Gon's insistence on training Anakin Skywalker remained unwavering. He argued before the Jedi Council that the boy was the chosen one, destined to bring balance to the Force. The Council, wary of Anakin's age and his emotional attachments, relented only because of Qui-Gon's persistence. Unlike Obi-Wan, who followed the Council's teachings with unyielding faith, Qui-Gon's approach was far more unconventional. He emphasized listening to the Force's will over rigid adherence to the Jedi Code, a philosophy that shaped Anakin's early years. Under Qui-Gon's guidance, Anakin's training took a different path. Where other masters might have tried to suppress the boy's fears and attachments, Qui-Gon helped him confront and understand them. He taught Anakin that emotions were a natural part of being human and could be channeled constructively rather than repressed. These lessons built a foundation of trust and mutual respect between them. Anakin, while still brimming with passion and potential, found an outlet for his emotions through meditation and self-awareness. The Jedi Council, however, struggled with Qui-Gon's methods. His disdain for their bureaucracy and his willingness to question their authority created tension within their ranks. Masters like Mace Windu and Ki-Adi-Mundi viewed his teachings as a dangerous deviation from tradition. Yoda, though cautious, recognized the merit in Qui-Gon's wisdom. He often reminded the Council that the Force was dynamic, and perhaps Qui-Gon's perspective was necessary to adapt to an evolving galaxy. As the Clone Wars erupted, Qui-Gon's influence continued to ripple through the Order. His refusal to blindly follow orders from the Senate inspired other Jedi to question their role in the war. He believed the Jedi should focus on being guardians of peace rather than generals in a political conflict. This perspective resonated with many, sowing seeds of doubt about the Council's alliance with the Republic. Qui-Gon's leadership inspired younger Jedi like Ahsoka Tano, who found validation in their own questioning of the Jedi's path. For Anakin, Qui-Gon's mentorship provided stability during the chaos of war. Palpatine's attempts to manipulate him were met with resistance. The Chancellor's subtle offers of power and control held less sway over a young Jedi who had been taught to trust the Force and himself. Qui-Gon's teachings grounded Anakin, shielding him from the allure of the dark side. Though the war still brought its share of loss and hardship, Anakin's bond with Qui-Gon ensured he did not feel isolated or misunderstood. The Jedi Council, faced with Qui-Gon's growing influence and the rising tension within the Republic, began to re-evaluate their own dogma. Some argued for reform, recognizing that their rigidity had alienated not only Qui-Gon, but also many others. Others doubled down on their traditions, fearing that change would erode the Jedi Order's foundation. The divide created a new dynamic, one that reflected the galaxy's own struggle between stagnation and evolution. Qui-Gon's survival reshaped the Jedi Order, the war, and Anakin's destiny. His teachings challenged the status quo and created a path that, while fraught with difficulty, held the promise of true balance. In this reality, the galaxy's future remained uncertain, but the presence of the Forgotten Master ensured it was not without hope. As the Clone Wars raged on, the choices made under Qui-Gon's guidance would ripple far beyond the battlefield, altering the fate of the Jedi and the galaxy itself. The twin suns of Tatooine set over the dusty landscape, but this time, the young girl gazing at the horizon wasn't Luke Skywalker. Leia, Her hands calloused from farm work and her boots worn from desert treks had taken his place. Across the galaxy, on the gleaming world of Alderaan, Luke was growing up under the tutelage of Bail Organa, surrounded by the luxuries of royalty and the intricacies of politics. From an early age, Luke exhibited a natural charm and an empathetic demeanor, qualities that endeared him to the people of Alderaan and made him a natural fit for diplomacy. Bail Organa nurtured these traits, teaching Luke how to navigate the labyrinthine world of Senate politics. Luke spent his childhood in grand halls, listening to debates about trade routes and military funding. He became a keen observer, learning how to read the subtle shifts in a senator's tone or expression. These lessons sharpened his mind and molded him into a thoughtful young leader. On Alderaan, Luke's life was one of comfort, but it wasn't without challenges. Bail often reminded him of the galaxy's injustices, urging him to use his privilege for good. Luke took these lessons to heart, becoming a passionate advocate for the downtrodden. His speeches in the Senate carried an emotional weight that resonated with those who heard him. Yet, as he grew older, Luke began to feel a pull he couldn't explain, a yearning for something beyond the structured life of a diplomat. Unbeknownst to him, the Force was quietly shaping his destiny. Meanwhile, Leia's life on Tatooine was far removed from the elegance of Alderaan. Raised by Owen and Beru Lars, she grew up in the harsh desert, learning the value of grit and self-reliance. Leia wasn't content with a quiet life tending moisture evaporators. She often ventured into Mos Eisley, where her sharp tongue and quick reflexes earned her a reputation as someone not to be trifled with. The challenges of Tatooine forged her into a fighter, both physically and mentally. Beneath her hardened exterior, however, was a fierce determination to make something of herself. The Force worked differently through Leia. While Luke's connection manifested in his ability to inspire and unify, Leia's gifts lay in her instincts and quick thinking. She had a knack for sensing danger before it struck, a skill that saved her more than once in the chaotic streets of Tatooine. Her path was shaped by survival, but like her brother, she felt a restless energy she couldn't quite place. The siblings' lives finally intersected when the Empire's shadow loomed over both Alderaan and Tatooine. Luke, a rising star in the Senate, began to clash with Imperial policies, drawing unwanted attention. Leia's rebellious streak led her to sabotage an Imperial outpost on Tatooine, bringing her into contact with a mysterious old hermit, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Recognizing her potential, Obi-Wan began to guide Leia, sparking a journey that would take her far beyond the deserts she had called home. As the galaxy spiraled toward rebellion, the contrast between Luke and Leia's upbringings became their greatest strength. Luke's diplomatic training gave him the tools to rally systems to the rebel cause, while Leia's resilience and courage made her a natural leader on the front lines. Their separate paths would eventually converge, and together they would become a force the Empire could not ignore. This alternate timeline revealed a truth about the Skywalker twins. No matter where they were raised, their shared destiny would always find a way to unite them. The Chancellor's office was eerily silent, save for the faint hum of Anakin Skywalker's lightsaber. Mace Windu stood firm, his blade inches from Palpatine's throat, his voice calm but commanding. "He's too dangerous to be left alive." Palpatine's words slithered through the room, laden with false promises. "Anakin, only I can save Padmé. Only I have the power to cheat death." For a moment, Anakin hesitated, his mind racing with visions of his wife's demise. But something deep within him, perhaps the very Force itself, urged him to resist. With a resolve that surprised even himself, he extinguished his blade. "No," Anakin said firmly, stepping back. This isn't the Jedi way. The shock on Palpatine's face was fleeting, replaced by a feral snarl as he unleashed a torrent of lightning. Mace countered with his saber, deflecting the deadly energy as Anakin sprang into action. Together they overwhelmed the Sith Lord, forcing him to his knees. When the moment came, it was Anakin who delivered the final blow, severing the head of Darth Sidious. The galaxy's greatest threat had been neutralized, but the cost of this decision was only beginning to reveal itself. The news of Palpatine's death spread quickly, throwing the Senate into chaos. Without his manipulative presence, factions within the Republic turned on one another, each vying for control in the vacuum of power. The Jedi Council, reeling from the revelation of the Sith's infiltration, found themselves targeted by senators who blamed them for Palpatine's demise. Anakin's role in the act made him a lightning rod for criticism, and whispers of treason began to circulate. Padmé Amidala, recovering from the emotional turmoil of the ordeal, became a beacon of stability. While her husband faced scrutiny, she used her position as a senator to counteract the growing distrust toward the Jedi. Padmé's impassioned speeches rallied loyalists and inspired the formation of a coalition determined to preserve the Republic's ideals. Her survival gave the burgeoning rebellion a leader who understood both the political arena and the personal stakes of the conflict. Anakin's rejection of the dark side did not grant him peace. The weight of his actions bore heavily on his shoulders, and he often questioned if he had made the right choice. Yet, it was Padmé who anchored him, reminding him of the life they had fought to protect. Though he remained with the Jedi, Anakin's relationship with the Order was strained. The Council's rigid structure clashed with his growing belief that their dogmatic adherence to tradition had left them vulnerable to the Sith. As the galaxy fractured, the remnants of Palpatine's schemes persisted. Loyalist factions within the military, unaware of his true nature, began to consolidate power under figures like Tarkin and Krennic. Anakin took to the battlefield once more, leading clone troopers and Jedi alike against splintered Imperial forces. His skill as a commander and his unwavering resolve earned him loyalty, but his struggles with the Jedi Code left him feeling increasingly isolated. Padmé's role in the rebellion solidified as she worked alongside Bail Organa and Mon Mothma to form an organized resistance. Her efforts were instrumental in keeping hope alive, and her leadership drew others to the cause. Though the galaxy was far from unified, her vision of a free and just republic gave the people something to fight for. In this alternate reality, Anakin's choice to reject the dark side created a fragile but enduring hope. While the Republic's future remained uncertain, the bonds of love and trust between Anakin and Padmé stood as a testament to the power of light in even the darkest times. The galaxy would never be the same, but with Palpatine's shadow lifted, the possibility of balance was no longer a distant dream. Together, Anakin and Padmé became symbols of resilience, proving that even in the face of temptation and despair, the right choice could still be made. Ahsoka Tano stood in the Jedi Council chamber, her expression resolute. After being exonerated of the crimes she had been falsely accused of, the Council extended an offer for her to return. In this timeline, Ahsoka chose to stay, her loyalty to the ideals of the Jedi outweighing her justified doubts about their leadership. This single decision rippled through the galaxy, altering the course of the Clone Wars and Anakin Skywalker's fate. Ahsoka's return was not without complications. Her trust in the Council had been deeply shaken, and she didn't hesitate to voice her concerns. She became a critical voice within the Order, questioning their choices and advocating for a more compassionate approach to the war. While many Jedi dismissed her as brash and impulsive, Others, including Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda, recognized the wisdom in her perspective. Her presence added a new layer to the ongoing debate about the Jedi's role in the conflict. For Anakin, Ahsoka's continued presence was a stabilizing force. She remained his confidant, someone who could challenge his darker impulses without fear of reprisal. Unlike Obi-Wan, whose adherence to the code often created a distance between master and apprentice, Ahsoka's bond with Anakin was deeply personal. She could see the cracks in his composure, the toll the war was taking on him, and she didn't hesitate to call him out when his emotions threatened to cloud his judgment. Anakin, in turn, valued her honesty and often found himself re-evaluating his decisions through her lens. As the war progressed, Ahsoka's unique perspective led her to question the origins of the conflict. Her investigation into the actions of the Separatists revealed patterns that pointed to a larger manipulation at play. With Anakin's help, she uncovered evidence of Palpatine's secret dealings, though they couldn't yet prove his connection to the Sith. This discovery planted seeds of doubt about the Chancellor's intentions, straining Anakin's relationship with his longtime mentor. Ahsoka's influence also extended to the clone troopers. Her willingness to treat them as individuals, rather than expendable soldiers, earned their loyalty. Commander Rex, in particular, became a close ally, and together they worked to improve the conditions for clones across the galaxy. It was through Rex that Ahsoka learned of the mysterious inhibitor chips implanted in every clone. Her relentless pursuit of the truth led to the chip's removal from Rex and several other commanders, a decision that would prove pivotal in the final days of the war. When the time came for Palpatine to enact Order 66, his plans unraveled. The clones who had been freed from their programming resisted the directive, buying the Jedi precious time to regroup. Ahsoka's efforts to expose the conspiracy emboldened others within the Order to question their leadership's decisions. The Jedi, though still fractured, were not as easily caught off guard. Anakin's path diverged sharply from the original timeline. With Ahsoka's unwavering support and her ability to challenge his worst impulses, he was less susceptible to Palpatine's manipulations. Though he still wrestled with his fears and attachments, Ahsoka's presence gave him a sense of clarity that prevented him from succumbing to the dark side. In this alternate reality, the Jedi Order was not destroyed, though it emerged from the war profoundly changed. Ahsoka's continued involvement reshaped the Order's philosophy, fostering a culture of accountability and empathy. The galaxy, while still scarred by war, found hope in the resilience of the Jedi and the unbreakable bond between a master and his former Padawan. Ahsoka's decision to stay had not only saved lives, but had ensured that the legacy of the Jedi would endure. The sands of Tatooine stretched endlessly beneath twin suns, but this time it was Leia Organa who called the desert home. Raised by Owen and Beru Lars, Leia grew up with a fierce independence and an insatiable curiosity about the galaxy beyond the horizon. Meanwhile, across the stars, Luke Organa thrived within the royal halls of Alderaan, mentored by Bail Organa, to become a voice of defiance against the Empire's tyranny. Their paths, though vastly different, were destined to intersect in ways that would change the fate of the galaxy. Leia's life took a pivotal turn when a droid carrying secret plans for the Death Star arrived on the Lars homestead. Her encounter with Obi-Wan Kenobi unlocked a destiny she had never imagined. Seeing her potential, Obi-Wan took her under his wing, beginning her training in the ways of the Jedi. Leia's natural determination and sharp intellect made her an exceptional student. While she initially struggled to let go of the practicality instilled by her upbringing, Her connection to the Force proved undeniable. Obi-Wan saw in Leia a spark of her mother's wisdom and her father's strength, a combination that made her uniquely suited for the challenges ahead. As Leia delved deeper into her training, the Force became a guiding presence in her life. She learned to wield a lightsaber with precision and to trust her instincts in ways she never had before. Her journey wasn't without its trials. Visions of a dark, armored figure haunted her dreams, and the weight of the Jedi legacy often felt overwhelming. Yet with Obi-Wan's guidance, she grew into a skilled warrior and a compassionate leader, ready to stand against the darkness threatening the galaxy. Luke, on the other hand, found his purpose within the Rebel Alliance. His upbringing on Alderaan instilled in him a deep sense of justice and an unwavering belief in the power of collective action. Under Bail Organa's mentorship, Luke became a charismatic leader, rallying others to the cause with his heartfelt speeches and strategic brilliance. While he lacked Leia's connection to the Force, his natural ability to inspire hope made him a cornerstone of the rebellion. When the siblings' paths finally crossed, it was aboard the Death Star. Leia, now a fledgling Jedi, infiltrated the station alongside Obi-Wan to rescue Luke after he was captured during a rebel mission. Their meeting was electric, two halves of a whole, brought together by destiny. Leia's calm confidence contrasted with Luke's fiery determination, but their shared goal united them. As they escaped the Death Star and regrouped with the rebel fleet, their bond began to grow. Leia's role as a Jedi brought a new dimension to the rebellion. Her ability to sense danger and her growing mastery of the Force made her an invaluable asset in battle. Luke, meanwhile, continued to rise as a political leader, forging alliances and outmaneuvering Imperial forces through sheer ingenuity. Together, they embodied the duality of hope and action, each complementing the other in their fight against the Empire. Their journey culminated in a confrontation with Darth Vader, the figure who had loomed over Leia's dreams and Luke's political struggles. Facing him together, Leia's Jedi training and Luke's leadership forged a dynamic the Empire had not anticipated. The galaxy, once fractured and oppressed, began to rally around the Organa siblings. In this alternate reality, the Force found balance not in a single chosen one, but in the combined strength of two. Through their united efforts, a spark of hope burned brighter than ever, illuminating a path to freedom for the galaxy. The duel in Theed's power generator chamber reached its tragic climax as Obi-Wan Kenobi, driven by fury over his master's injury, charged Darth Maul. But this time, the tide shifted. Maul's dual-bladed lightsaber struck true, cutting down Obi-Wan before Qui-Gon could intervene. The young Jedi's body fell lifeless to the chamber floor, leaving Qui-Gon Jinn alone to face his apprentice's killer. Fueled by anguish and a vengeance he had never known, Qui-Gon unleashed a relentless assault, eventually defeating Maul. Yet the victory rang hollow, his heart heavy with the weight of loss. Obi-Wan's death sent shockwaves through Qui-Gon's spirit. The man who had always championed following the will of the Force now found himself consumed by doubt. His faith wavered, replaced by a burning determination to prevent such a loss from happening again. With Obi-Wan gone, Qui-Gon became Anakin Skywalker's sole mentor, a role he approached with an intensity bordering on obsession. The bond they formed was strong, but it was forged in the fires of Qui-Gon's grief and guilt. He saw Anakin not only as the chosen one, but as his chance to make amends for failing his first apprentice. Anakin's training took on a sharper edge. Qui-Gon pushed the boy harder, encouraging him to embrace his emotions while attempting to guide him toward balance. However, the lines between understanding and indulgence blurred. Anakin's natural instincts and passions thrived under Qui-Gon's tutelage, but the absence of Obi-Wan's measured approach left gaps that Palpatine began to exploit. The Chancellor, ever watchful, saw an opportunity to steer both Anakin and Qui-Gon toward his plans, feeding their frustrations with the Jedi Council's rigid doctrine. Meanwhile, Darth Maul's survival proved to be a masterstroke for Palpatine's designs. Though wounded, Maul returned to his master more emboldened than ever, his victory over Obi-Wan cementing his place in the Sith hierarchy. Palpatine rewarded him with greater responsibilities, grooming him as a key enforcer in the shadows of the galaxy. With Maul's cunning and ruthlessness, the Sith's reach expanded faster than in the original timeline. His calculated strikes destabilized the Republic, laying the groundwork for the Clone Wars. As the years passed, Qui-Gon's focus on Anakin became all-consuming. His willingness to challenge the Council's decisions intensified, creating rifts within the Order. Yoda and Mace Windu observed the changes with concern, but their attempts to intervene only pushed Qui-Gon further into isolation. He distrusted the Council, believing their adherence to tradition had cost him Obi-Wan and threatened Anakin's future. This divide left the Jedi vulnerable, unable to present a united front as the Sith's influence grew. Anakin, caught between Qui-Gon's teachings and Palpatine's manipulations, teetered on the edge of his destiny. The absence of Obi-Wan's steady hand left him vulnerable to the darker aspects of his mentor's grief-driven guidance. As the galaxy descended into chaos, Anakin found himself questioning not just his place within the Jedi, but the very purpose of their order. Maul's rise continued unabated. He became a symbol of fear across the galaxy, his presence a stark reminder of the Sith's growing power. His clashes with the Jedi left a trail of destruction, further eroding the Republic's stability. Palpatine's plan to seize control was unfolding flawlessly, with Maul as a critical instrument in his grand design. In this alternate timeline, the balance of the Force grew ever more precarious. Qui-Gon's inability to reconcile his grief with his duty, Anakin's growing internal conflict, and Maul's unchecked rise created a galaxy on the brink of darkness. The loss of Obi-Wan, a figure of hope and restraint, set the stage for a future where the lines between light and dark blurred, leaving the galaxy to grapple with the consequences of a single, devastating moment. In another timeline, Darth Plagueis awoke from his would-be final sleep to find his apprentice, Sidious, standing over him, lightsaber in hand. The betrayal was expected. It was the way of the Sith, after all. But this time, Plagueis had prepared. With a mastery of the dark side that transcended death itself, he manipulated the midi-chlorians to sustain his life, rendering Sidious' strike incomplete. Palpatine's shock was brief, replaced by calculated resolve as he realized his master still lived. Yet this survival would fundamentally alter the Sith's path and the galaxy itself. Plagueis, now fully aware of his apprentice's ambitions, chose not to confront Sidious directly. Instead, he allowed his apprentice to believe he had succeeded, retreating into the shadows to observe and influence from afar. Plagueis understood that the true strength of the Sith lay not in open power grabs, but in the manipulation of systems and people over decades. His survival reframed the dynamic of the rule of two, creating a Sith Lord who operated in the shadows, even as his apprentice played the public game. For Sidious, the illusion of freedom became a double-edged sword. With Plagueis alive, the ultimate prize of sole control over the Sith legacy remained out of reach. While he continued to execute his plan to rise as Emperor, he now did so under the watchful eye of a master who had already foreseen his moves. Plagueis allowed the Clone Wars to unfold, but subtly altered events to ensure his apprentice did not gain unchecked power. The war became a more complex and prolonged conflict, with unexpected factions and betrayals orchestrated by Plagueis to keep Sidious in check. The Jedi Order, though still blindsided by the Sith's machinations, began to sense a deeper disturbance in the Force. Yoda and Mace Windu, in particular, grew increasingly wary as events unfolded in ways that defied prediction. The Sith's plan, while still devastating, became less focused, more fragmented, as Plagueis inserted his own designs into the chaos. The Jedi, though weakened, found moments of clarity that allowed them to regroup and resist more effectively. Plagueis' survival also impacted Anakin Skywalker. Where Sidious once had free rein to manipulate the young Jedi, the presence of his master added layers to the seduction. Plagueis, intrigued by Anakin's potential, chose to engage him directly. Unlike Sidious' crude appeals to power and fear, Plagueis approached Anakin as a scholar of the Force, offering knowledge and understanding that the Jedi had long denied. Anakin, already torn between loyalty and ambition, found himself caught between the two Sith Lords, each vying for his allegiance in subtle and conflicting ways. As the war escalated, Plagueis' influence became more pronounced. He began experimenting with his long-held obsession, the manipulation of life itself. Secret facilities across the galaxy became breeding grounds for Force-sensitive experiments, creating new possibilities for the Sith's domination. These efforts alarmed even Sidious, who began to see his master's vision as a threat to his own ambitions. The rule of two began to splinter under the weight of their rivalry. In this timeline, the Sith's survival no longer hinged on a single master-apprentice lineage, but became a sprawling, insidious network of influence and power. Plagueis' survival ensured that the dark side's legacy evolved into something far more enduring and pervasive. The Jedi, though battered, stood against this growing tide with a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that their adversary was no longer a singular entity, but a multifaceted force that threatened to consume the galaxy. Plagueis' survival had not just reshaped the Sith, it had redefined the struggle for balance in the Force. When the smoke cleared from the ruins of the Jedi Temple, Yoda stood among the ashes, the weight of failure pressing heavily on his shoulders. But instead of retreating to Dagobah to reflect on his mistakes, the ancient Jedi Master made a different choice. Yoda resolved to stay in the galaxy's shadowed corners, leading the remnants of the Jedi in a covert resistance against the rising Empire. This decision not only preserved the Jedi Order, but reshaped its philosophy and its role in the galaxy. Yoda's survival and leadership created an underground network of Jedi who adapted to guerrilla warfare. Operating in secrecy, they struck at key Imperial targets, sabotaged supply lines, and provided aid to rebel cells. Yoda's mastery of the Force made him a ghostly figure, slipping through the cracks of the Empire's grasp. His presence inspired hope among the surviving Jedi and their allies, showing that even in the face of overwhelming darkness, the light could endure. Under Yoda's guidance, the Jedi evolved. No longer confined by the rigid structures of the Republic-era order, they began to explore new ways of thinking about the Force. Yoda himself led this transformation, recognizing that the dogmatic approach of the old order had contributed to their downfall. He encouraged the Jedi to embrace flexibility, to see the Force not as a tool to be wielded, but as a living, dynamic presence that demanded humility and understanding. This philosophical shift also changed how the Jedi interacted with others. Where they had once held themselves apart as guardians of peace, Yoda now emphasized connection and collaboration. The Jedi became more integrated with the communities they served, building trust and solidarity rather than imposing authority. This approach not only protected them from the Empire's hunters, but also restored the Order's reputation as compassionate defenders of the innocent. As the years passed, Yoda's influence extended far beyond the scattered Jedi. His presence in the galaxy became a symbol of resilience. Even those who had never seen him began to speak of a small green figure who appeared in the darkest moments to offer wisdom and guidance. These tales inspired countless acts of defiance against the Empire, strengthening the growing rebellion. Meanwhile, the Empire struggled to stamp out this elusive threat. Darth Vader led relentless campaigns to hunt the remaining Jedi, but Yoda's tactics kept them one step ahead. The Emperor, aware of Yoda's significance, grew increasingly paranoid. Sidious dispatched entire fleets to chase rumors, spreading his forces thin and diverting resources away from the rebellion's growing operations. The Jedi Order, though diminished in numbers, found strength in its transformation. Each survivor became a beacon of the new philosophy, teaching others to balance tradition with adaptability. This evolution not only preserved their legacy, but also laid the groundwork for a future where the Jedi could thrive in a galaxy free from the Empire's oppression. In this timeline, Yoda's decision to remain active reshaped the galaxy's fate. The Jedi, under his leadership, became more than an order. They became a movement. The lessons of their past failures guided their path forward, proving that even in the face of great loss, renewal was possible. Yoda's choice to stay ensured that the Jedi's light continued to shine, offering hope to a galaxy desperate for freedom. The smoking wreckage of Utapau was thought to mark the end of General Grievous, the fearsome leader of the separatist droid armies. But in this alternate timeline, Grievous activated a contingency plan as his organic components burned. His consciousness was transferred to a hidden sanctuary deep in separatist space, where loyal engineers began his reconstruction. The galaxy believed him defeated, but Grievous was about to rise as something far more dangerous, a self-determined warlord no longer bound by the Sith's schemes. Freed from the constraints of Palpatine's manipulation, Grievous used his survival to chart a new course. His hatred for both the Jedi and the Sith, whom he now saw as equally culpable in the galaxy's endless conflict, fueled his ambition. Grievous turned his mechanical genius toward developing advanced technologies that could counter Force users. He refined his cybernetic body, incorporating cortosis plating to resist lightsaber strikes and enhancing his reflexes to near superhuman levels. His skeletal frame became sleeker, more efficient, and nearly indestructible. Each modification made him a more formidable combatant and a symbol of technological superiority over the organic galaxy. Grievous' return to the galactic stage came with brutal precision. He struck Imperial outposts and Jedi hideouts alike, his forces a combination of reprogrammed separatist droids and new models he had personally designed. His droids were no longer mere cannon fodder, but highly specialized units capable of outmatching even elite Imperial troops. Grievous also employed mercenaries and disenfranchised soldiers, turning his growing army into a diverse and adaptable force. The galaxy soon realized that Grievous was not interested in ruling through ideology. Instead, he sought domination through efficiency and fear. He targeted critical trade routes, weapon depots, and shipyards, crippling the Empire's supply lines and undermining rebel efforts to unify. Grievous' raids were swift and devastating, leaving little trace of his movements. His mechanical nature allowed him to operate without the limitations of organic leadership, making him an unpredictable and elusive foe. For the Jedi survivors of Order 66, Grievous was a nightmare reborn. His hatred for their order had not waned, and his advancements made him an even greater threat. He began capturing Force users, not out of loyalty to the Sith, but to study their abilities. His experiments yielded unsettling results. Combat droids designed to predict and counteract Jedi techniques, weapons capable of disrupting Force-sensitive perceptions, and traps that turned the Jedi's strengths into vulnerabilities. Grievous's obsession with defeating the Force itself made him a uniquely terrifying adversary. The Sith also found themselves at odds with their former enforcer. Palpatine and Vader underestimated Grievous' capacity for independence, and their attempts to eliminate him only deepened his resolve. Grievous saw the Sith as relics of an outdated philosophy, driven by their own self-destruction. His vision of a galaxy ruled by mechanical order stood in stark contrast to the Sith's chaotic ambition. As Grievous carved his path across the galaxy, he became more than a warlord. He embodied the fear of unchecked technological advancement, a force that neither the Empire nor the Rebellion could fully control. His survival changed the balance of power, introducing a third faction that operated outside the Force's influence. In a galaxy dominated by ideological struggles, Grievous' rise as the ultimate pragmatist proved that technology, when wielded without conscience, could challenge even the most deeply rooted powers. Grievous' survival reshaped the galaxy's conflicts. His mechanical tyranny forced the Jedi, the Sith, and the Rebellion to confront not only their enemies, but the consequences of their own reliance on tradition and power. In this alternate reality, Grievous' relentless pursuit of dominance became a stark reminder that the line between innovation and destruction could be as thin as the blade of a lightsaber. The fiery shores of Mustafar served as a crucible for Anakin Skywalker, now Darth Vader. In this alternate timeline, the confrontation with Emperor Palpatine took a shocking turn. Consumed by his desire to control his own destiny and protect Padmé at all costs, Vader turned on his Sith Master in a moment of raw power and betrayal. With a decisive blow of his lightsaber, Palpatine's reign ended far earlier than anyone could have anticipated. But this act was not born of redemption. It was the culmination of Anakin's descent into darkness. Vader, no longer an apprentice, rose as the sole Sith Lord. With Palpatine gone, the galaxy's balance shifted drastically. Vader, seizing the Emperor's resources, declared himself the new ruler of the burgeoning Empire. His ascension was swift and ruthless, consolidating power through a combination of fear and overwhelming military might. Unlike Palpatine's manipulative cunning, Vader's rule was marked by direct action. He focused on crushing dissent with brutal efficiency, eliminating perceived threats before they could gain momentum. The Senate, already hollowed out under Palpatine's regime, was disbanded entirely, leaving no pretense of democracy. The galaxy belonged to Vader. Vader's motivations, however, remained complex. While Palpatine had sought domination for its own sake, Vader's rule was deeply personal. Every decision he made stemmed from his fixation on control. Control over the galaxy, the Force, and his own pain. Padmé's fate remained a pivotal moment. Despite his belief that his actions could save her, the Force's cruel irony played out the same. Her death left Vader consumed by grief, but instead of breaking him, it hardened his resolve. He channeled his sorrow into a relentless drive to reshape the galaxy into his vision of order, one that would never again allow the chaos and loss he had endured. The Jedi were among Vader's first targets. Order 66 had decimated their ranks, but under his rule, their extermination became a personal crusade. Vader personally led hunts for the surviving Jedi, his mastery of the dark side making him nearly unstoppable. The Sith's rule of two was discarded. Vader saw no need for an apprentice to challenge him. Instead, he created the Imperial Knights, an elite force of dark side adepts loyal only to him. They became his enforcers, spreading fear across the galaxy. Despite his overwhelming power, Vader's empire faced resistance. Rebel cells formed, spurred on by stories of the Jedi and the hope that darkness could not last forever. These small pockets of defiance were met with overwhelming force, but their persistence exposed the cracks in Vader's rule. His obsession with eliminating rebellion often blinded him to the broader complexities of governance, leaving the galaxy's infrastructure to deteriorate under his oppressive hand. Vader's relationship with the Force also evolved in unexpected ways. Without Palpatine's guidance, his exploration of the dark side became more introspective. He delved into ancient Sith knowledge, seeking answers to the questions that haunted him. Could the dead truly be brought back? Was there a way to undo the past? These pursuits, while expanding his power, isolated him further. The galaxy he ruled was vast, but his solitude grew even greater. This Vader-dominated galaxy was one of unrelenting oppression. While Palpatine's empire relied on manipulation and bureaucracy, Vader's was a regime of terror and military might. His overwhelming presence cast a shadow that stretched across the stars, extinguishing hope wherever it dared to flicker. Yet, within this darkness, the seeds of resistance grew, fueled by the belief that even the mightiest tyrants could fall. In this reality, Vader had achieved the control he always craved, but it came at the cost of everything else. His eternal shadow ruled the galaxy, but within him, the remnants of Anakin Skywalker remained, a faint echo of the man he once was. The Clone Wars were a carefully orchestrated symphony of chaos, each note played to perfection by Darth Sidious. But what if the Sith Lord's machinations were abruptly cut short? Imagine a galaxy thrown into disarray as Chancellor Palpatine met an untimely demise, whether through an assassin's blade, a Jedi's strike, or unforeseen circumstances. Without his shadowy influence steering the galaxy's fate, both the Republic and Separatists faced an uncertain future, plunging the galaxy into chaos. Palpatine's death sent shockwaves through the Republic. Publicly, the loss of their leader during a time of galactic war devastated morale. The Senate, already fractured by infighting and corruption, found itself leaderless. Rival factions immediately clashed over the question of succession. The Loyalist Committee, led by Bail Organa and Mon Mothma, argued for the swift election of a new Chancellor to restore order. Meanwhile, more authoritarian voices, such as Masameda and Sate Pestage, pushed for a military junta to ensure the war effort continued without interruption. As the Republic floundered, Supreme Commander of the Grand Army, Mace Windu, took a pragmatic approach. Recognizing the Republic's vulnerability, he worked to rally the Jedi Order to maintain stability. But without Palpatine's schemes to frame them as traitors, the Jedi were thrust into a more overt political role. While some senators supported their efforts to guide the Republic, others accused the Jedi of overreach, sowing further discord. On the battlefield, the clone army struggled without clear directives. The Kaminoan biochips designed to trigger Order 66 were now useless without Sidious command, leaving the clones as pawns in a leaderless war. Without the Sith's master plan to consolidate power, the clones' loyalty to the Republic clashed with the growing disillusionment among their ranks. Some battalions broke away, forming independent factions that sought to carve out their own destiny amid the chaos. The Separatists, too, were thrown into turmoil. Count Dooku, already a Sith pawn, found himself without a master. Without Sidious guidance, his grand vision for the galaxy unraveled. The Separatist Council, a coalition of corporate leaders and warlords, quickly splintered. Greedy for power, members like Newt Gunray and Wat Tambor vied for control, turning on one another in an attempt to seize dominance. The droid armies, once united under Dooku's leadership, became tools for infighting as former allies became bitter enemies. Dooku's position was precarious. His political influence diminished without Sidious backing, and his Sith training left him ill-equipped to navigate the cutthroat politics of the separatist movement. Facing betrayal from within, Dooku was forced to retreat into hiding, leaving the separatists leaderless. Without a central figure to rally behind, their war effort crumbled, with key worlds like Raxus and Geonosis falling to opportunistic Republic strikes. The galaxy teetered on the edge of a prolonged war of attrition. The absence of Palpatine's manipulations meant neither side could achieve a decisive victory. The Republic, plagued by internal divisions, struggled to rebuild its leadership while facing opposition from independent factions. The Separatists devolved into fractured states, each pursuing its own agenda. Meanwhile, opportunistic crime syndicates, pirate fleets, and neutral systems exploited the chaos, carving out their own territories in the power vacuum. Amid this turmoil, the Jedi Order faced a critical choice. Their increased involvement in galactic politics alienated some within their own ranks, leading to debates over their role in the Republic's future. Yoda, ever the voice of caution, advocated for a return to their spiritual roots, while Windu pushed for more direct action to stabilize the galaxy. This philosophical divide planted the seeds of a potential schism within the Jedi, threatening to fracture their already diminished ranks. In this alternate timeline, the Clone Wars became a conflict without a clear ending. Palpatine's death removed the puppeteer pulling the galaxy's strings, but it left a void that no single faction could fill. The Republic and Separatists were left to grapple with their own shortcomings, each unable to achieve the dominance they had once envisioned. The galaxy, fractured and chaotic, became a proving ground for new alliances, ideologies, and power struggles. Without Palpatine's guiding hand, the fate of the galaxy was no longer certain. It rested on the choices of those left to pick up the pieces. In a galaxy suffocating under the Empire's iron grip, the Jedi survivors of Order 66 made a pivotal decision. They would no longer hide. Instead, they would actively join the Rebel Alliance, bringing their wisdom, lightsabers, and deep connection to the Force to the fight against tyranny. This choice reshaped the rebellion, but it also created tension as the Jedi's philosophies clashed with the brutal realities of guerrilla warfare. The Jedi brought hope to the Alliance. Their presence galvanized soldiers and leaders alike, symbolizing resilience against the dark side's dominion. Figures like Yoda, Ahsoka Tano, and a re-emerging Obi-Wan Kenobi became icons of the Resistance. Their abilities to foresee battles, manipulate the battlefield with the Force, and lead with unwavering determination made them invaluable. Rebel commanders welcomed their insight, while ground troops marveled at the rare sight of Jedi leading the charge. Yet, the Jedi were unaccustomed to the ruthlessness required in a war fought from the shadows. Guerrilla warfare demanded subterfuge, sabotage, and collateral damage, concepts that directly contradicted the Jedi Code. Missions targeting Imperial supply chains often endangered civilians, raising heated debates between the rebel leaders and their Jedi allies. Mon Mothma, a staunch advocate for the rebellion's morality, struggled to mediate between the pragmatic demands of war and the Jedi's insistence on preserving life wherever possible. The Jedi themselves faced internal conflicts. Kanan Jarrus and Ahsoka, shaped by years of surviving the Empire's relentless hunts, argued for adaptability. They believed the Jedi must evolve, embracing unconventional methods to counter the Empire's overwhelming might. Yoda and Obi-Wan, however, maintained that straying too far from the Jedi Code risked falling into the same darkness they sought to eradicate. This philosophical divide mirrored the rebellion's broader struggle between idealism and practicality. Despite the friction, the Jedi's influence shifted the tide of the war. Their presence inspired new recruits and bolstered the rebellion's credibility. Sabotage missions became more precise, minimizing civilian casualties through the Jedi's strategic foresight. However, the Empire was quick to respond. Palpatine dispatched inquisitors and legions of stormtroopers to hunt the Jedi down, escalating the conflict. The Sith viewed the Jedi's involvement as a direct challenge to their dominion, and Darth Vader himself led missions to eliminate his former comrades. In this timeline, the Jedi's choice to fight changed the rebellion from an underdog resistance to a force capable of standing toe-to-toe with the Empire. Yet, their involvement raised profound questions about the cost of victory and the balance between survival and morality. As they fought to restore peace to the galaxy, the Jedi walked a perilous path, risking their own principles in the pursuit of justice. The Death Star, an embodiment of Imperial dominance, succeeded in firing upon Yavin 4 moments before the Rebel Alliance could launch their daring attack. With the moon's destruction, the rebellion's leadership, Mon Mothma, General Dodonna, and Princess Leia, was obliterated in an instant. The once cohesive Rebel Alliance was left leaderless, scattered, and vulnerable, its symbol of hope reduced to cosmic debris. The loss of Yavin 4 marked a turning point in galactic history. Without the rebel leadership, communication between cells broke down. The organized efforts of the Alliance fragmented into isolated skirmishes. Small resistance groups, now operating without a unifying strategy, were picked off one by the Empire's forces. The galaxy became eerily silent, with fewer voices daring to speak out against the Emperor's rule. For those who survived the destruction, the psychological toll was immense. Luke Skywalker, who had barely escaped the battle, found himself grappling with guilt and despair. Obi-Wan's teachings and Leia's defiance had once inspired him, but their absence left a void he struggled to fill. Lacking guidance and hope, Luke became a wandering figure, unsure of his place in a galaxy that seemed to have surrendered to the dark side. The Empire, emboldened by its decisive victory, tightened its grip across the stars. The destruction of Yavin 4 served as a chilling message to those who still harbored dreams of rebellion. Resistance was futile, and disobedience would lead to annihilation. Fear rippled through the galaxy, silencing dissent and discouraging even the most daring from taking a stand. Entire systems pledged loyalty to the Emperor, abandoning any thought of defiance. Yet even in the face of such overwhelming darkness, embers of rebellion remained. Individuals like Han Solo and Chewbacca, once skeptical of the Alliance's idealism, began carrying out covert missions to disrupt Imperial operations. Former rebel soldiers, though scattered, started organizing underground resistance efforts. Though the Alliance was shattered, the idea of rebellion could not be so easily extinguished. This timeline portrays a galaxy where hope seemed irreparably lost. The destruction of Yavin 4 left the Empire ascendant and the rebellion in ruins. Yet, the enduring spirit of resistance flickered, reminding the galaxy that even the greatest darkness could not erase the dream of freedom entirely. It would take time, sacrifice, and courage for the seeds of rebellion to grow again. But the vision of a free galaxy lived on in the hearts of a few brave souls. Obi-Wan Kenobi was the epitome of Jedi discipline and composure, a paragon of the Order's principles. But what if he succumbed to the temptations of the dark side? Imagine a galaxy where the unshakable Jedi Knight fell, his betrayal shattering the trust of the Jedi Order and upending Anakin Skywalker's world. The turn began subtly, as all such falls do. Palpatine, ever the manipulator, saw potential in Obi-Wan's quiet frustrations, his doubts about the Jedi Council's rigidity, and his guilt over Qui-Gon Jinn's death. Sidious approached Obi-Wan not with grand promises of power, but with the suggestion that the Jedi were losing their way, that Obi-Wan alone could restore balance by embracing a broader perspective. At first, Obi-Wan resisted, but the weight of war, loss, and responsibility wore him down. Eventually, the lure of Palpatine's arguments and the promise of clarity in chaos became too much. Obi-Wan's defection sent shockwaves through the Jedi Order. The Council, blindsided by the loss of one of their finest, scrambled to understand what had gone wrong. Yoda and Mace Windu debated whether they had failed their teachings or if Obi-Wan had always harbored hidden doubts. Worse still, Obi-Wan's intimate knowledge of Jedi strategies and secrets made him a dangerous adversary. Every battle the Jedi fought now came with the haunting question: had Obi-Wan anticipated this? The Clone Wars took on an even deadlier edge, as the former Jedi used his insights to devastating effect. For Anakin, the betrayal was personal. Obi-Wan had been more than a mentor. He was a brother, a father figure, and the steady presence that had anchored Anakin's turbulent emotions. The loss of that bond left Anakin teetering between grief and rage. The Council tasked him with hunting down Obi-Wan, believing that Anakin's strength in the Force made him the only Jedi capable of matching his former master. But the mission was a double-edged sword. Every encounter with Obi-Wan forced Anakin to confront the possibility of his own vulnerability to the dark side. Obi-Wan, now Palpatine's apprentice, was given the Sith title Darth Solus, symbolizing his solitary path. Unlike the fiery brutality of Maul or the raw power of Vader, Solus embodied calculated precision. He didn't just strike, he dismantled, targeting the foundations of the Jedi's strength. His mastery of tactics turned the tide of numerous battles, forcing the Jedi and the Republic to fight defensively. The inevitable confrontation between Anakin and Obi-Wan became a legend. On a barren world consumed by ash and fire, the two clashed, lightsabers blazing with fury and sorrow. Anakin's anger boiled over as he demanded answers. How could Obi-Wan, the man who had sworn to uphold justice, abandon everything they stood for? Obi-Wan, calm yet resolute, claimed he had done what was necessary, that the Jedi Order's stagnation had doomed them long before his fall. Their duel wasn't just a battle of blades, but a collision of ideals, each trying to sway the other back to their side. In this timeline, the galaxy was shaped not just by the Sith's plans or the Jedi's resistance, but by the profound fracture caused by Obi-Wan's betrayal. His fall forced the Jedi to re-evaluate their methods and spurred Anakin to grapple with his own destiny in ways that would determine the future of the Force itself. The tragedy of Obi-Wan Kenobi became a tale told for generations, a warning of how even the brightest light could cast the darkest shadow. In an alternate galaxy, the ceaseless conflict between Jedi and Sith reached an unprecedented conclusion long before the Clone Wars could ignite. What if, instead of opposing forces locked in perpetual war, the two ideologies found common ground, birthing a new philosophy that embraced both the light and the dark sides of the Force? The emergence of the Grey Order changed the destiny of the galaxy, creating a world where balance was not just an ideal, but a lived reality. The seeds of this transformation were sown in an unlikely alliance. Ancient Jedi scholars and Sith dissidents, weary of the cycle of destruction, began secret dialogues. They debated the true nature of the Force, questioning whether the dichotomy between light and dark was as absolute as their respective orders had taught. Over time, these discussions bore fruit in the form of a philosophy that recognized the necessity of both light and dark as complementary forces, essential to the galaxy's harmony. The formation of the Grey Order was not without resistance. Traditionalist Jedi on the High Council dismissed the movement as a dangerous dilution of their principles. Likewise, the Sith saw it as a betrayal of their pursuit of unfettered power. Yet the Order persisted, gathering followers from both sides who sought an end to centuries of bloodshed. Key figures, such as Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn and renegade Sith Lord Darth Revan, became the symbolic leaders of this new path. Their combined wisdom and charisma united disparate factions, culminating in a groundbreaking summit that reshaped galactic history. Under the Grey Order's guidance, the galaxy experienced a rare era of cooperation and progress. The Jedi temples and Sith strongholds were replaced by centers of balance, where individuals were taught to harness both aspects of the Force without succumbing to extremism. Force-sensitive beings learned to confront their fears and desires openly, rather than suppress or indulge them recklessly. The new philosophy encouraged self-awareness, accountability, and unity, fostering a sense of purpose that transcended the old divisions. The political landscape evolved as well. Without the Sith manipulating events from the shadows or the Jedi enforcing rigid doctrines, the Galactic Republic became more equitable. The Grey Order advised leaders with impartiality, ensuring that the principles of balance extended into governance. Systems once plagued by corruption and oppression found stability, as leaders learned to embrace nuance rather than relying on black and white thinking. However, this balance was not without its challenges. The Order struggled to maintain its ideals in the face of dissent from radicals on both sides. Some Jedi clung to their ascetic traditions, while splinter groups of Sith sought to reignite the pursuit of domination. The Grey Order's greatest trials came not from external enemies, but from within, as it strove to hold true to its philosophy amid a galaxy that was still learning to accept it. The galaxy shaped by the Grey Order was far from perfect, but it was undeniably different. By achieving balance before the Clone Wars, the destructive conflicts that had scarred countless generations were avoided. Instead of endless war, the galaxy embarked on a path of growth, guided by those who understood that true strength lay not in the Force's extremes, but in its equilibrium. This alternate history reminds us that peace is possible, even in the face of deep divisions, if only we have the courage to seek understanding over dominance. Mon Mothma was the steadfast symbol of hope and integrity in the Rebel Alliance, her leadership defined by a commitment to justice and freedom. But in an alternate galaxy, the unrelenting pressure of war pushed her down a darker path. What if Mon Mothma, burdened by the weight of the rebellion's cause, chose to wield absolute power to secure victory? The result was a rebellion that became as oppressive as the empire it sought to overthrow. The seeds of her transformation lay in the early defeats suffered by the rebellion. Each loss weighed heavily on Mon Mothma, her resolve hardening with every planet subjugated and ally lost. At first, her decisions seemed like pragmatic adjustments to the realities of war, concentrating power within the alliance, bypassing democratic processes to streamline operations. Yet, as the rebellion grew, so did her belief that only a unified, unquestioning leadership could deliver the galaxy from tyranny. She began to see dissent, even within the Alliance, as a threat to their survival. Her rhetoric shifted. No longer did she speak solely of hope and freedom. Instead, she emphasized loyalty, discipline, and sacrifice. Under her leadership, the Alliance enacted measures to ensure compliance among its ranks. Suspected spies and dissenters were detained without trial, their fates often sealed by secret tribunals. What had once been a diverse coalition of free thinkers became an organization bound by fear and authoritarian control. The very values that had defined the rebellion were eroded in the name of victory. The turning point came after a critical victory over the Empire. Mon Mothma declared that the rebellion must now consolidate its power to prevent chaos. She refused to step down, arguing that the galaxy was not yet ready for the instability of democracy. Some of her closest allies, including Leia Organa and Admiral Akbar, grew alarmed at her growing authoritarianism. Their attempts to counsel her were met with suspicion and accusations of disloyalty. Tensions within the rebellion reached a breaking point, splintering the once united movement. Meanwhile, the galaxy saw a new kind of leader in Mon Mothma. To many, she was a savior who had delivered them from the Empire's grasp. Her propaganda portrayed her as a visionary, uniting the galaxy under a single banner. Yet, for those who resisted her rule, the line between the Empire and the rebellion blurred. Mon Mothma's forces employed tactics once condemned as imperial atrocities, including planetary blockades, forced conscription, and mass surveillance. Leia Organa and other disillusioned rebels formed a splinter group, vowing to restore the rebellion's original ideals. They found themselves in the ironic position of fighting against their former comrades, launching guerrilla campaigns against Mon Mothma's regime. The galaxy plunged into a new kind of war, one where the lines between hero and villain had been irreparably muddied. This alternate history reveals the dangers of power, even in the hands of those who begin with noble intentions. Mon Mothma's fall from grace was not the result of inherent malice, but of the belief that ends could justify means. Her story serves as a reminder that tyranny can arise from any corner of the galaxy when accountability and compassion are sacrificed for control. Darth Maul's existence was forged in rage and fueled by hatred. From the moment he was torn from his family and shaped into a weapon by Darth Sidious, his destiny seemed irrevocably tied to the Sith. Yet even shadows can find light. What if Maul, broken and cast aside, sought redemption not for the sake of himself, but to dismantle the very Sith order that created him? The turning point in this alternate timeline begins during his exile on Malachor. Maul's obsession with vengeance against Sidious and Kenobi consumed him until he stumbled upon an ancient Jedi holocron. The teachings contained within spoke of balance, justice, and the futility of unchecked hatred. Initially, Maul dismissed the holocron's messages as naive dogma, but as years of isolation wore on, its words began to resonate. Could his endless cycle of destruction truly bring him the victory he craved? The first sign of Maul's shift came when he encountered a desperate village under siege by pirates. In the past, such suffering would have been beneath his notice or exploited for his gain. This time, however, something within him stirred. Drawing upon both his Sith training and the wisdom of the holocron, Maul dismantled the pirate threat with calculated efficiency, sparing the villagers rather than enslaving them. Though they feared him, their gratitude planted a seed of purpose he had never known. Maul's path toward redemption was not linear. His old instincts often clashed with his emerging morality. The galaxy, after all, had been cruel to him, and its systems of power felt irredeemably corrupt. Yet, his desire to destroy Sidious and the Sith grew more focused. Maul realized that vengeance alone was insufficient. He needed to prevent the Sith from ever rising again. To do so, he would need allies, an unfamiliar and humbling prospect for someone who had always walked alone. Ahsoka Tano became one such ally, though their partnership was fraught with mistrust. When Maul sought her out during the Empire's rise, she hesitated to believe his intentions. It was his actions, not his words, that convinced her. Maul began using his knowledge of the dark side and his cunning strategies to sabotage Imperial operations, targeting key Sith infrastructure. Slowly, Ahsoka saw a man burdened not just by hatred, but by regret. A man who sought to make amends, even as he doubted his own worthiness. The Jedi remnants were far less forgiving. Survivors of Order 66 viewed Maul as a symbol of everything they had lost, and his presence among them ignited bitter divisions. Despite this, Maul persisted, proving his loyalty time and again through decisive action. His insight into Sidious's mind and Sith strategy gave the rebellion critical advantages in their fight against the Empire. He became a weapon of the light, wielded against the darkness he once served. In the end, Maul's redemption was not marked by grand accolades or universal acceptance. His final confrontation with Sidious was a brutal clash of wills, fought not for power, but to break the chain of Sith tyranny. Though he fell in battle, Maul's sacrifice dismantled Sidious's plans and inspired others to carry on the fight. His story became a testament to the idea that even those steeped in shadow could find the strength to step into the light, leaving behind a legacy of redemption in a galaxy desperate for hope. Obi-Wan Kenobi had always been a paragon of Jedi discipline. Known as the Negotiator, his wit and wisdom often ended conflicts before they began. Yet, in an alternate timeline, Obi-Wan's path led him to a confrontation few would have imagined, a duel with Darth Sidious, the Dark Lord of the Sith. The galaxy's fate rested on this singular battle, a clash of light and dark that would echo for generations. It began when the truth of Palpatine's identity reached the Jedi Order earlier than it had in the original timeline. Anakin Skywalker, tormented by visions of Padmé's fate but unwilling to betray his values, confided in Obi-Wan rather than succumbing to Sidious's manipulation. Together, they confronted the Jedi Council, leading to a hasty plan to apprehend the Sith Lord before his influence could spread further. Mace Windu and other masters prepared to lead the charge, but it was Obi-Wan who insisted on being the one to face Palpatine directly. He understood the stakes better than most, and knew that diplomacy had no place here, only action. The confrontation took place in the grand chambers of the Senate, the very heart of Palpatine's power. The room was shrouded in eerie silence, save for the hum of crimson and blue lightsabers. Palpatine, cloaked in shadow, welcomed Obi-Wan with a twisted smile. "Kenobi," he hissed, his voice dripping with malice. "A Jedi so devoted to the rules now standing before me, ready to defy them all. How poetic." Obi-Wan did not rise to the taunt. Instead, he focused on the Force, letting it guide his movements as Palpatine lunged forward. The Sith Lord's ferocity was unlike anything Obi-Wan had ever faced. Each strike of Palpatine's blade was a calculated effort to break him, physically and mentally. Yet Obi-Wan's mastery of Sorisu, the defensive lightsaber form, kept him alive in a duel that seemed impossible to win. The battle wasn't just about lightsaber skill. Palpatine's true strength lay in his command of the dark side. He hurled Senate pods with a flick of his wrist, forcing Obi-Wan to leap and evade, his movements precise yet desperate. Lightning crackled from Palpatine's fingertips, arcing toward Obi-Wan, who deflected it with his blade, though the sheer power left him shaken. For every calculated move Obi-Wan made, the Sith Lord retaliated with overwhelming aggression, turning the Senate chamber into a maelstrom of destruction. But Obi-Wan's strength was his resilience. He refused to falter, even as Palpatine's words sought to erode his resolve. "You cannot win, Kenobi. The Jedi are doomed, scattered to the winds. Join me, and together we can forge a new galaxy, one where order reigns supreme." Obi-Wan's response was steady, his voice carrying the quiet strength of a man who knew his purpose. "Your order is built on fear. The Jedi stand for something greater than you will ever understand." As the duel raged on, Obi-Wan began to exploit Palpatine's arrogance. The Sith Lord, so accustomed to victory through manipulation, underestimated Obi-Wan's ability to adapt. Using his opponent's overconfidence against him, Obi-Wan maneuvered Palpatine into a vulnerable position. A well-timed parry disarmed the Sith Lord momentarily, but Palpatine retaliated with a devastating surge of lightning that hurled Obi-Wan across the chamber. The battle was a testament to both their strengths, one rooted in relentless will, the other in unbridled power. In the end, Obi-Wan's determination was not enough to claim victory. Reinforcements from the Jedi Order arrived too late to prevent Palpatine from escaping, but their intervention saved Obi-Wan's life. The battle had weakened the Sith Lord, forcing him to retreat and rethink his plans. The galaxy remained on the brink of chaos, yet Obi-Wan's bravery lit a spark of hope. His duel with Palpatine was not the final confrontation, but it became a rallying cry for those who sought to resist the encroaching darkness. This alternate timeline underscores Obi-Wan's unwavering commitment to the Jedi ideals. While he did not defeat Sidious outright, his willingness to stand against overwhelming evil inspired the galaxy. The echoes of his courage reverberated through the Rebel Alliance and the remnants of the Jedi Order, proving that even in the darkest moments, one individual's light could make all the difference. The dim glow of the Emperor's throne room cast long shadows over Luke Skywalker as he reached out to his father, his voice trembling with desperation. "There's still good in you," he pleaded, his belief unwavering even as Darth Vader's mask betrayed no sign of emotion. But in this timeline, the faint light within Vader never breaks through. The Sith Lord stands unmoved, wielding his crimson blade as Luke collapses under the weight of the Emperor's Force lightning. When Luke's lifeless form slumps to the ground, the shift in the galaxy's fate is immediate. The rebellion, weakened by the loss of its greatest hero, falters. Without Luke's redemption of Vader, the spark of hope is snuffed out. Instead of helping to overthrow the Empire, Darth Vader solidifies his position as Palpatine's most loyal enforcer, ensuring the Sith's dominance remains absolute. Under Vader's dominion, the galaxy becomes a dark, oppressive landscape. His authority, tempered by his tactical brilliance, brings a brutal efficiency to the Empire's reign. The Sith Lord eliminates dissension with precision, turning even the smallest uprisings into examples of imperial wrath. Planets that once harbored rebel sympathies find themselves under relentless siege. Entire systems are subjected to military occupation, their economies drained to fuel the imperial war machine. Yet while Vader outwardly remains loyal to the Emperor, a quiet storm brews beneath the surface. Palpatine, ever the schemer, recognizes the danger of his apprentice's power unchecked. The dynamic between master and apprentice shifts dramatically as Palpatine begins to plant seeds of distrust. He encourages the rise of younger, ambitious officers, subtly pitting them against Vader. But the Sith Lord, well versed in the art of betrayal, counters with calculated precision. Palpatine's efforts to curb Vader's influence inadvertently strengthen his resolve, making him a more formidable presence in the Empire. Meanwhile, Leia Organa emerges as the sole beacon of resistance. Devastated by the loss of her brother, she channels her grief into rebuilding the rebellion. Leia's leadership becomes a symbol of defiance, her efforts to rally the galaxy against Vader and Palpatine creating small but persistent pockets of resistance. Though her resources are limited, her unwavering determination ensures that the fight for freedom never fully dies. Vader's rule is marked by an insidious blend of fear and order. He introduces a new era of technological advancements, including enhanced surveillance networks and an expanded fleet of Star Destroyers. His obsession with control drives him to further develop the Empire's war capabilities, ensuring that no corner of the galaxy remains untouched by his influence. The Death Star is no longer the pinnacle of Imperial power, but merely one tool among many in Vader's arsenal. As the years pass, Vader's legacy becomes a complex web of triumph and tragedy. His iron grip on the galaxy ensures stability, but at the cost of freedom and hope. Planets once vibrant with culture and independence are reduced to sterile, obedient outposts. The Force itself seems muted under the weight of Vader's tyranny, as the Jedi's teachings fade into obscurity. Yet, whispers of rebellion persist, carried by those who refuse to accept the Sith's domination. Vader's relationship with the Force evolves in unexpected ways. Without the redemptive arc tied to his son, the Sith Lord delves deeper into the dark side. His connection to the Force grows more formidable, his powers surpassing even Palpatine's expectations. But with this immense power comes an increasing isolation. Haunted by visions of Padmé, Luke, and what might have been, Vader's inner turmoil manifests in bursts of unrestrained fury. His ruthlessness becomes legendary, but so too does his growing detachment from the Empire he serves. The galaxy under Vader's dominion is a chilling portrait of absolute power unchecked. Yet despite his unyielding control, the seeds of rebellion remain. Leia's undying resistance and the scattered remnants of the Jedi's teachings ensure that the fight for freedom continues, no matter how dire the circumstances. Vader's refusal to turn marks not the end of the conflict, but the beginning of an era defined by relentless struggle. A reminder that even in the darkest times, the spark of hope can never truly be extinguished. When the Empire rose from the ashes of the Republic, the Jedi Order was shattered. Survivors of Order 66 scattered across the galaxy, hunted by the Sith's relentless purge. But in this alternate reality, instead of retreating into isolated exile, the Jedi reformed in the shadows. Together they became an unseen force, guiding a fragmented rebellion while evading the Empire's grasp. In this secret existence, the Jedi adapted to a life of subterfuge. They abandoned their grand temples and ancient traditions, replacing them with hidden enclaves on remote, uncharted worlds. These sanctuaries, accessible only through encrypted hyperspace routes, became the nerve centers of a quiet resistance. Masters and Padawans trained in silence, their lightsabers rarely ignited, their connection to the Force deliberately masked to avoid detection. The Jedi Order, once a beacon of light for the galaxy, now operated as a shadowy council of wisdom and strategy. One of the most significant figures in this underground movement was Shakti. Her survival after the fall of the Jedi Temple positioned her as a central leader. She worked closely with surviving Jedi like Quinlan Vos and Ahsoka Tano, both uniquely skilled in covert operations. Together, they developed a new Jedi code, one centered around resilience and adaptability rather than the rigid detachment of the old order. These teachings emphasized balance over asceticism, ensuring that the next generation of Jedi would not repeat the mistakes of their predecessors. The Jedi's efforts extended beyond mere survival. They worked to undermine the Empire's control at every turn. Using their profound connection to the Force, they became spies, saboteurs, and informants. Their influence infiltrated Imperial supply chains, turned loyal officers into double agents, and ensured critical intelligence made its way to the Rebel Alliance. The Jedi remained unseen, their contributions attributed to luck or skill rather than the Force's intervention. Luke Skywalker's journey in this timeline takes a different path. Rather than being raised in isolation, he is discovered by the hidden Jedi at a young age. Under the guidance of Shak Ti and the Council, Luke becomes a symbol of hope for the underground order. His training is more holistic, blending combat proficiency with lessons in diplomacy, subterfuge, and the careful manipulation of the Force. Unlike the Luke of the original timeline, this version matures with the weight of the Jedi's survival on his shoulders. The Empire's search for the hidden Jedi becomes a central focus of its rule. Darth Vader, consumed by his personal vendetta against the Order, dedicates vast resources to rooting out their enclaves. Inquisitors patrol the galaxy, their pursuit relentless. Despite their efforts, the Jedi's secrecy prevails, frustrating the Empire at every turn. The tension between the hunter and the hunted becomes a constant backdrop to the galaxy's growing resistance. The Jedi's influence on the rebellion is profound. Their strategic insights and covert operations give the Alliance an edge against the Empire's overwhelming might. Rebel leaders like Mon Mothma and Bail Organa rely heavily on the Jedi's guidance, forming an alliance between the Old Republic's remnants and the Order's enduring wisdom. The partnership brings a newfound unity to the fractured rebellion, bolstering morale and strengthening their resolve. The hidden Jedi Order also begins to reshape the galaxy's understanding of the Force. Their covert presence fosters a new mythology, one where the Jedi are seen as elusive guardians rather than warriors. Their actions inspire countless individuals to resist Imperial oppression, creating a ripple effect that spreads far beyond their immediate influence. Stories of mysterious interventions and impossible victories circulate among the populace, reigniting hope in the darkest corners of the galaxy. This alternate reality paints a picture of a Jedi Order that adapts rather than falls. Their resilience and quiet heroism become the foundation of a resistance that refuses to surrender, proving that even in the shadows, the light of the Force cannot be extinguished. By choosing unity over isolation and strategy over confrontation, the Jedi endure, not as relics of the past, but as architects of a brighter future. In an alternate galaxy where the inhibitor chips implanted within the clone troopers were discovered and removed early in the Clone Wars, the fate of these genetically engineered warriors took a strikingly different turn. Free from the insidious control of Order 66, the clones became a powerful and unpredictable force in the galaxy, a faction neither bound to the Jedi nor enslaved by the machinations of the Sith. This newfound autonomy thrust the clones into a position of unprecedented agency, forcing them to grapple with their identity and purpose in a galaxy at war. The clones, under the leadership of seasoned commanders like Rex, Cody, and Wolf, formed an independent coalition. Calling themselves the Infinite Army, their ranks were bolstered by the sheer number of troopers who shared a bond forged in the crucible of the battlefield. This army was no longer a tool of the Republic or the Separatists. Instead, it became a faction dedicated to its own survival and values. The clones, having witnessed the failures and corruption of galactic leadership, sought to carve out a space where their kind could thrive, without being manipulated by those in power. Initially, the clones' independence was met with confusion and hostility. The Republic viewed them as deserters, and the Separatists saw them as a potential threat. However, the Infinite Army demonstrated an uncanny ability to operate in the chaos of the Clone Wars. They turned their battlefield expertise into a strategic advantage, taking on mercenary contracts to fund their operations while maintaining a strict code of honor. They refused to engage in actions that would harm civilians, earning them respect and allies in unexpected corners of the galaxy. Despite their growing reputation, the clones faced profound internal challenges. Many struggled to define their purpose beyond war. For soldiers bred to fight, the absence of clear directives left a void that needed to be filled. Philosophical debates about their future and identity became common among their ranks. Some clones advocated for creating a peaceful haven for their kind, while others argued for maintaining their warrior ethos to protect the galaxy's oppressed. These ideological differences occasionally led to friction, but also strengthened their collective resolve to remain unified. The Infinite Army's influence began to reshape the galactic power structure. With their strategic brilliance and unparalleled combat prowess, they became a force capable of tipping the scales in any engagement. As they operated as free agents, both the Republic and the Separatists sought their allegiance, offering resources and concessions to gain their support. The clones, however, remained fiercely independent, using these negotiations to extract what they needed, while refusing to become pawns in anyone else's game. As the Clone Wars raged, the Infinite Army's actions ignited hope among disenfranchised groups across the galaxy. Their defiance demonstrated that even in a realm dominated by tyrants and warlords, those cast aside could forge their destinies. Clones who were once nameless soldiers became symbols of resilience, their stories spreading across the stars to inspire rebellion and autonomy. A turning point came when the Infinite Army uncovered the Sith's manipulation behind the war. Realizing they were tools in a grander scheme to destroy the Jedi and seize power, the clones united with a singular goal: dismantle the Sith's plans and prevent others from suffering their fate. This revelation transformed them from mercenaries to liberators, solidifying their role as one of the most critical and unpredictable forces in the galaxy. The Infinite Army's legacy transcended the Clone Wars. These clones proved that even beings created for servitude could redefine their existence. Their evolution from pawns to players in the galactic struggle inspired hope far and wide. Amid chaos, they stood as a testament to the power of choice, proving that even in darkness, there were those willing to fight for the light on their own terms. In a galaxy shaped by subtle changes, Luke Skywalker finds Rey on Jakku as a frightened child. Instead of growing up in isolation, Rey becomes Luke's apprentice, her innate Force sensitivity recognized and nurtured under his mentorship. Haunted by Ben Solo's fall, Luke sees Rey as a second chance. He trains her with caution, emphasizing balance and control. Rey, inquisitive and disciplined, thrives under his guidance, becoming Luke's first true apprentice in rebuilding the Jedi Order. Her presence rekindles his hope and reshapes her into a compassionate Force user, blending ancient wisdom with modern ideals. Rey's training reshapes the Resistance as the First Order rises. A powerful warrior and strategist, she unites the remnants of the Rebel Alliance alongside General Leia Organa. Rey becomes a symbol of hope, her leadership galvanizing the Resistance into a cohesive and determined force. Her encounters with Kylo Ren reveal her faith in redemption, challenging his descent into darkness. Acting as a bridge between Luke and Ben, Rey refuses to let the light be extinguished, forging an unshakable resolve to bring balance to the Force. Unlike her canon counterpart, this Rey fights with clarity and preparation, leading daring missions that weaken the First Order.